Hi, DeRusso, the Majestic rider. So today I'm going to help you with the pacey horse. So when this horse came to me, he was really pacey. He's already better, but I wanted to show you one of the exercises I'm doing with him. And when a horse is pacey, it means that the legs on the same side, so the right front and the right hind, are moving together. And it makes for a bouncy ride, and it's not always the best thing for the horse's health in the long-term run. It's not so good for their back. So we don't like to ride the pace. It's okay if they pace when they're loose, but when we're riding them, we want them to do their gait. When they're doing the pace, it's 2 beats. That means their right front and right hind are moving together, and then their left front and left hind are moving together. So they get 2 beats like that, where we're trying to get the horse to step each foot down and create 4 beats. So what I have to teach this horse to do, because he's been ridden incorrectly, is to actually separate his legs. I like to start all the pacey horses on the ground to make sure they understand what I want them to do. And so it's not so confusing and they don't have to carry any weight while they're doing it. So again, he's doing much better. I like to use the poles a lot to help to separate their legs when I'm riding in the arena. And then I also teach them to put their head down, which I will show you. Today I have them in a surcingle and side rein, so I'm going to hook those up. I've taught him to give to bit pressure, so he understands once I put those side reins on that he's supposed to bring his head down. By bringing his head down and rounding his back, it'll take him further away from the pace and give him a more square gait. What he used to do when they were riding him was have his head way up and his back inverted, and then he would just swing his legs. Now when he's loose, he prefers to pace, but sometimes he'll also trot a little bit. What I'm trying to get in the end is that when he's loose, he starts either gaiting or trotting more, and then I know I'm well on my way to fixing his gait. So let me show you what to do. So if your horse is very energetic, run them around first, or you can lunge them around. He's already been out and he's not super energetic. So we are just going to hook him up. When you use the side reins in the beginning, you want to hook them very loose until the horse gets used to it. This guy is now used to it, and so now I can hook it up fairly firm on him. And what I'm trying to do is help to show him to keep his head down while he's going over these poles. So if you do not want to, in other words, start out with this, you want to make sure your horse can go over poles first, and that he can do the surcingle and the side reins without the poles before you add in the poles. And with this exercise, I have a lot of poles. You'll see all the poles all the way around. When I start the horses, I only start with 4 poles, and I set them up in a clock, like at 12, 3, 6, and 9 to make it easier for him. So I'm going to send him out. And yesterday we went over the poles, but we went over the poles without the surcingle on. So this is hard on them, especially a horse that's genetically, he's like, this is really hard, I don't want to do it. Genetically bred to pace, and a lot of horses are gaited wise. Some of them are doing it because they're going in the show ring, and that's what they were bred for, and they're bred for more of a heavy shoe. So if they pace and then put that heavy shoe on, they'll get a decent gait out of that horse, where if they're more on the trotty side and they put a heavy shoe on that front end, then that horse is going to start trotting more. So first you just want to get the horse walking over the poles, and once they can do that well, then we actually want to start speeding them up. But first, it's just get them over the poles and let them figure it out. Now, again, I start without the surcingle and just have the horse go over the poles in the beginning, because if they trip, that surcingle is going to block them a little bit, and they could actually fall over. So I want to make sure they understand the poles well and go over them well before I start putting them in that surcingle. Okay? Now he has a very short neck, so that surcingle might look tight, but it's really not. You can see he can still pick his head up. But this is very hard. When a horse has been pacing a long time, they have to learn to separate their legs, and that pretty much means they have to learn to walk again differently. And it's almost like a person who's had a stroke, and now they got to figure out everything on how to do it again, even though they knew how to walk before. So even though this horse knew how to walk and he could do it fine, as he went faster, he went to pacing. So what I'm trying to do is get all those legs separated so it's just 4 beats. So the requirements are, first, your horse needs to know how to lunge. You can't just jump into this without the horse knowing how to lunge. So he has to learn how to lunge well, and then you have to be able to steer him with the lunge. So again, it's best to do that just with the 4 poles in the beginning. It might look easy, but it's actually extremely difficult. But groundwork is good for everybody, and this gets you good exercise as well as they're going around. Now, once they can lunge well, you can control the horse, they have decent ground manners, you put those poles down, have them just step over the poles and don't worry if they're pacing or not. You got to start somewhere, and that's where you want to start, because some of them will trip and fall all over these poles in the beginning until they figure out how to use their feet. And some of them can't feel their feet as well because they've had some crazy things on their legs and they've become numb to them. So sometimes when they hit the poles, they won't care about them much. It's best to use wooden poles. If you have big poles, that's fine. You want things that are not going to roll away or move too much if they hit them. If you use something like PVC piping, the horse will figure out in time that they can just kick it or they can step on it and break it, and then they won't pick their feet up anymore. Okay? Now remember, this is hard exercise, so in the beginning, you do it a couple minutes each direction, and that's all you want to do. And then over the next several days, then you can start, if they're doing well, to start having them flat walk and then do a running walk over it. Now, if they're pacey and you have a walking horse, those are the gaits you want to get, the flat walk and the running walk. Say you have a Rocky or a Kentucky Mountain or something else, you want to get a flat walk. They might be able to do a running walk if you want that. But otherwise, you're looking for a saddle gait, and sometimes it's hard to do a saddle gait over these poles. So you might have to ride them over the poles versus doing it on the lunge line, because it's easier to help them stay in gait if you're up in the saddle when you're going for the saddle gait. Some of those horses will actually convert over to a trot when they're loose. And if they trot, go ahead and let them trot for a while and then slow them down and try it again, because the trotting is the opposite of the pace, so that's a good thing. It's going to actually help them. Now you'll see I keep wigging, kind of swinging this lunge line at him. That's just to create energy to keep him going. Okay, so now we're going to turn. So we're going to pull, whoop, and then we're going to send him off the other direction. Now a lot of times when you change direction, some of them will cut the poles just like he did, and that's okay. Okay? So if they reach down with their head or they carry their head low, you might not even need the side reins. But the side reins in the surcingle are good for horses that have their heads way up in the air and they're really inverted, and that's how he was before. So I really wanted to bring his head down so he knew, and in time, see, he's like, let me just canter over that. In time, we kind of just want his head neutral. He's a high-headed walking horse, so it's going to be, higher than the other breeds. That's just normal for him and the way he's built. But I don't want his head tucked down to his chest or anything like that. I'm just trying to get his head lower so we can relax his neck and his spine. So as you're watching him go over these poles, you'll see some of the poles are completely flat. Some are elevated on one side and some are elevated on the other side. That's so I can work on his proprioception at the same time I'm breaking up the pace. Proprioception means that in the horse world, that the horse knows where to put his feet. And again, since some of these horses have had things done to their feet, they don't always feel them as well as they should. Or some of them have never been out in difficult terrain. They've only been ridden on the flat or on the road, so they don't know how to get over obstacles. So this is kind of like football players going through tires, and they learn where to put their feet, and then they learn how to do it faster and faster so they can be real agile on that football field. That's what this is doing for the horse. It's teaching him where to put his feet. It's teaching him to pay attention. And it's teaching him to elevate his legs higher. So if it was a trippy horse, it would also help with that. It's making him more agile. It's making him think. Now, it's also going to be good for his top line because it makes him use his muscles in his belly and his back and his hindquarters. Okay? All right. So with pacey horses, there's many different breeds, and many different breeds can pace. So when you're trying to get them to gait and get out of the pace, we do it a little bit differently for the breeds because it just works kind of differently on them. So with the flat walk and the running walk, we're just trying to get these horses walking and then go faster and faster. So we really got to get that flat walk established well, and then once we got them separating their legs, then over time we just go a little bit faster and a little bit faster, and then we'll have their running walk. Well, you want to then get that running walk really established well before you start trying to increase speed in case you want to go to a saddle gait or a rack after that. If you just get them going and then you keep adding more and more speed, they're going to go back to pacing because that's the thing that they can do the fastest. And pacing and trotting is easier than gaiting. Gaiting, they have to pick those feet up and they have to have all the legs separated. Where the pace and the trot are just 2 beats, and they can kind of swing those legs and it's easier for them. So they're going to choose the easiest thing because why use more energy if you don't have to? Okay. Now you'll see as he went around, he knocked one of the poles down. That's okay. We'll pick that up when we go to turn him again. Okay. So I usually do this for about 5 minutes or so. Not he's very cute, isn't he? And even though this, so I usually do it for about 5 minutes in each direction, but I'm not doing it so much because now, because I'm videotaping, I'm sure you don't want to watch me just do this for 5 minutes. So I'm going to turn him, and then we're going to try to get him up into a flat walk. So we're going to put this pole back up, and these little jump sets, I can send you links if you need them, but they work really well because you can make them short or really tall if the horse is really not paying attention. Okay, so as you try to make them go faster, these short ropes work usually pretty good because if you're too far away and lunging them on one of those 20 or 30 foot ropes, the horse knows how close you are and they're like, I don't have to do it. That was a good, very good flat walk. So you would think from watching this horse that you're like, what are you talking about, pacey? He's not pacey. Oh, he was pacing. He was pacing a lot. I'll try to find a video to put that in with it. There you go. So he paced a little bit right there. So again, we don't want to go that speed yet. We're trying to build his muscles and condition him so he can hold the flat walk first. So you really got to use this as building blocks. You got to get your horse just walking slow first and not pacing. And then you got to get them walking faster in like their flat walk or first gait and not pacing. If they canter, I just tug on them a little bit and slow them back down like he did. Some of them will do that, and then they'll figure out, well, that's pretty tiring too, so I'll just walk over it, and they'll give up after time. Now, some of them are so lateral or pacey that it's very difficult for them to move those legs separated, and I'll make a bunch of cavaletti poles, and I'll lunge them back and forth over that and get them trotting. And then I'll keep conditioning them to get the muscles for the trot. And then I'll start doing stuff like this. But it's hard when they're very pacey. And this is his flat walk right now. You might think that's not very fast, but for him, this is pretty fast because he couldn't even do this without pacing before. But once they understand and learn, especially if they're younger, he's just 8, they'll start coming around because they haven't used those muscles for 15 or 20 years. But if you have an older one, you can still, doesn't matter if it's been pacing its whole life, you can still make it much better, but it's going to take time and practice. And so that's the hard part. Will you be consistent enough to do it? And then the other part is riding them. So some of these horses, like the Tennessee walking horse, you want to ride with contact, and you want to frame them up and ride with semi-collection to get them gaiting well. Okay? If you just flop the reins, there's no contact, and you speed up, well, they'll speed up to that pace if they're pacey, and they'll just swing those legs around. So you do have to help them to gait and show them what speed to go. Now, if you have a Rocky, Kentucky Mountain, Peruvian Paso, different breed, you still have to ride with some contact in the beginning until they're sure what gait to do. And once they understand how to stay in that gait, then over time they'll get better and better. So you want to teach them how to bring their heads down, how to round their back out, and then again, riding over poles or difficult terrain will help them a lot. That's why a lot of people like to ride them into the sand or over rocks, because they have to pick their feet up and it's much harder for them to pace. Good boy. So when you go to turn them, you want to turn them when they're doing it right, not when they're doing it wrong. Okay? Now it's okay. You see, he just cheated. They all like to cheat. He had a very nice canter step there. So even though this horse is pacey, he is very athletic. He has a very nice canter. He can rock back. And so he's got some good breeding in there. But what happens to a lot of these horses is people ride them wrong and they ride them too fast and they don't condition them, and the horses just end up pacing, trying to go faster for you, and then you end up with a pacing horse. Okay? So each horse has different genes. Some are pacey, some are trotty, some just gait, some gait, trot, and pace, some gait and pace, some gait and trot, and some will pace and trot, and you won't see them do any gait. Okay? They can all gait if they have those genes. So if it's a real gaited horse, they'll be able to gait. It's just more difficult for some, and most of the time that's because they didn't start with a good trainer in the beginning, or one who knew gaited horses, or somebody bought a young horse because it was cheaper, thought it would be easy to train, and then realized training the gait, it can be extremely difficult. Okay? So that's why horses that gait well and have experience are expensive horses, and ones that don't gait as well or don't have a lot of experience will not cost as much. So you just got to decide, do you want to put the work in or put the money in? So he's doing quite well. Now you saw there he got a little faster and he tried to throw his head up and he started to pace. So that's what it helps me with these side reins. Because even if I pull on the rope, that's not going to bring his head down. The side reins provide pressure. So when he puts his head up, they are pulling on him. Now, since I was talking, I hooked them up a little bit weird. So we'll fix that in a minute. So a lot of people hate pacey horses. I don't hate them. They don't like them because, it's not a smooth ride. I just condition them and train them, and then they do just fine. And then the other thing, the pacey horses, because they're swinging their legs, they don't pick their legs up as high, so some of them can be more trippy. But again, if you teach them these gymnastic exercises like this, it helps with their proprioception, and it'll help pick their feet up. If they're real trippy, I'll roll the toe on their shoe, make sure their toes cut back enough. Then I'll rocker the shoe if that doesn't work. And a really bad one, we might square the shoe. I always like to do x-rays to make sure that nothing's wrong with them, that they don't have navicular or anything like that. And if those things aren't helping, they're just tripping and falling a lot, you've got to get a vet to help work it up and make sure they don't have something like EPM or arthritis in their neck, or another issue that's causing them to trip. Okay, well, let's fix those things for a second. Okay, I was just fixing the side reins because as I was talking to you, I hooked them up a little bit goofy. Now we fixed them. That can happen to any of us. They still work just fine, but now they're hooked up appropriately. Okay, go back out. So what I want to show you now is I'm going to try to make him go a little bit faster. And what he's probably going to do is start to pace, or he might start to canter. I don't want him so fast that he really can't get over these poles, since I have pressure on that bit. And so while I'm working them, if I'm trying to then get their running walk or their saddle gait, I'm going to speed them up. And you got to see what can they do. Okay? Can they hold it at another speed? There's his running walk. And you saw him just trip and catch his toe. That's why it's nice to do this with you on the ground and not on their back in the beginning. Who cares if they trip when you're not on them, but when you're on them, you don't want them to do that. So he's trying, but he's like, this is difficult, and these poles are coming up pretty quick, and I got big feet, and I got a big stride, so it's harder for him, okay? Horse with a shorter stride, it's much easier. For the walking horse who has overreach like he does, it's much harder, and you'll see him get to some of these poles, and he's like, I can't get over that yet, and he'll shorten his stride, or he'll lengthen it to try to get those front feet over. So I think it's most difficult for the walking horses that have big strides versus the other breeds. But again, if he tries to really pace and get over these poles, pacing, it's going to be extremely difficult, and that would probably make him trip more. So he's smart enough that he's figured this out. He's like, oh, this is difficult, but I guess I can walk faster and do this. So this is the first time I've had him go this fast over the poles, but he's doing quite well. But I don't want to overdo it. This is extremely difficult. So I'll usually do the flat walk for like 5 minutes, and then, well, if they couldn't do anything at all and I had to do their very slow walk, I'd do that for 5 minutes each direction, and then I would do their flat walk for maybe 2 or 3 minutes each direction. Once they can do that well, then I start changing it, and then I do their flat walk 5 minutes, and then I start doing their running walk or their next gait just a couple of minutes. And then over time, I start doing that intermediate gait running walk or their saddle gait for 5 minutes as well. Okay, so we're going to stop them and go the other way. Oh. So you're trying to increase their strength, so it's good to time this stuff so you know exactly how long you're doing it for. And I'm not timing it now because I'm talking to you. So again, him just going over the poles and me lunging him is teaching him a lot. You don't need to be on their back to fix the pace. And again, it's safer if they're very trippy or they don't know what to do with their feet to be on the ground doing it first. A lot of people can't recognize the gaits when they're up in the saddle, so if you're on the ground, it'll also teach you a lot, because you stare at their legs and you're like, oh, they are separated, then I must be doing a good job. Or, oh, the right front and the right hind are moving together, so he must be pacing. Now he knocked that pole down, and that's okay, because he was just goofing around with his canter. You just keep going. You can stop if you want, but otherwise you just go over it. It doesn't matter that it fell. You do want things to move. If they're completely stable and the horse trips and the energy doesn't disperse, they might, really fall over it. But since that moved, he could catch himself. But you'll see when he goes over the poles, he picks his feet up much higher versus when he's just going on his own and there's no poles there. So we're just going to go another minute and then we'll be done with this. So remember, this is hard work. If you don't know how hard it is, set up some poles for yourself and run over them, or set up some tires, and go through them as quick as you can, and you'll see it takes a lot of your energy away, but it also really uses your brain. So this can be tiring for them and tiring for their body if they've never used their muscles correctly. So they can get sore. You want to keep checking their legs and their back and their neck and making sure they're okay with it. But I've fixed many pacey horses. The hard part is, even if I fix them, they will go back to pacing if the owners do not keep up the exercises and ride them correctly. Okay, because you got to take care of things and you got to promote them. Again, when they come in training, they're only here for a couple of months, where they might have been pacing their entire life. So they got all those years to catch up on doing that correct gait. So the owner's got to put in the time and the practice as well. So how often do I do this with a pacey horse? 5 days a week. And I'll do this again until I think they're good at it, and then I'll start to ride them, or I'll kind of alternate things and ride the trail and ride the arena. And then I also, which I'll show you, do lots of exercises that's lateral work, like leg yielding, moving their hindquarters and their shoulders. There I kind of tapped him because he was slowing down. And lots of circles and bending, because all those things will help the horse get away from the pace. So with the walking horses, you get a flat walk, and once you got that flat walk, you're pretty golden, and then over time you just increase the speed. And you should have your running walk, and many times if you've done it correctly, they will stay out of the pace as long as you don't go too fast. With the other breeds with the shorter strides, and you're going for more of a saddle gait, as you push them faster and they change gaits from a flat walk to a saddle gait, those horses sometimes will pace, and if you taught them all the lateral work, sometimes if you just push their shoulders over, their hindquarters, or do a little leg yield, they'll go into gait. And then just every time they're doing something right, stop, reward them, praise them, so they understand that's the right answer. And if you do that enough, the horse will figure it out in time that's what you want, and they will try to do it for you. Okay. So once I'm done, good boy, you made it. You survived. I'm going to unhook him. Good job. Now, this is the hard part because I know a lot of people want to ride their horses and they don't want to do this stuff. It's just like with anything. Say you built a house and things are breaking and they tell you something's wrong with the foundation. You got to go back, fix the foundation, rebuild the house back up. If you don't, for the rest of your life, things will be breaking in that house. It'll be due to the foundation. You'll end up spending so much more money than if you just went back and fixed it to start with. It's the same with the horse. You have to go back to their building blocks because they didn't have any, and that's why they're pacing usually. So you have to go back and take the time fixing it, and then you can build it up and your horse won't be pacing anymore. But if you don't, you do this once in a while, the horse won't get better. You have to do this consistently, 3 to 5 days a week for the next couple of months, and really get them separating their legs, teach them all the basic arena work, moving their shoulders, circles, hindquarters. And you might think, well, I don't need that stuff on the trail. You do. You do need it to keep you safe because you'll have more control of your horse and your horse will be better broke for it. You know, so you'll be able to control them better. And you got to get them back to the beginning so they really understand, because what you don't always get is there's holes in their training, and that's why they're pacing. And you got to go back and teach them everything they need to know so then you can communicate. So then when you half halt and push them over, they understand what to do, and that'll separate their legs. But if you have a pacey horse, say I was riding a Rocky, and it doesn't know anything like that, and I try to half halt and push it over when it's pacing, you know what it's going to do? It's going to keep pacing because it doesn't understand the cues I'm giving it. So you have to do all the basic groundwork, the arena work, really get that horse understanding before you can actually get it not to pace under saddle. Okay? All right, hope that helps.